welcome to Growing Deeper Daily with Gateway Church. Today we're continuing our look into the book of Judges. We're going to be finishing up over the next 2 days the themes and the major characters we see here in the book of Judges. And as we have already discussed, it's really a tragic tale. It's an example of the nation of Israel spiraling away and farther away from God and his purposes for them. Remember, the generations that are being discussed in Judges are those that are far removed now from the era of Moses and Joshua. Remember, Moses led the nation out of bondage in Egypt. He led them through those wilderness years. He brought them right to the edge of the promised land. And then Joshua brought them over the Jordan into the promised land and divided and conquered and settled the land. But in the generations thereafter, the people of Israel lacked trust and faith in the God that had delivered so faithfully in the past. Isn't that a sad commentary oftentimes for us as well? When challenges arise, we often forget that God has delivered us so great in the past, so mightily in the even recent past in our life. In the book of Judges, we see these cycles of sin and rebellion and judgment, and God hearing their cries for deliverance by the hands of a judge, and then the peace that often comes. And we see these cycles talked about. And there are 6 major judges where we see these cycles at least most explicitly explained. We talked about some already of Jehu and Othniel and Deborah. Yesterday we talked about Gideon. And today we hear about Jephthah. Jephthah is leading in Israel in a time when the Ammonites are really a threat for the people of Israel. And it says that the leaders of Israel come to Jephthah asking for him to help. And we're going to see that Jephthah, this very skilled warrior, lacked a deep understanding of the God of Israel. And we see this tragic tale unfold for Jephthah in not trusting God, and as a result, paying dearly. This is found in verse 28 and 29 of Judges 11. It says, "And the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead, he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the Ammonites, shall be the Lord's. I will offer it up as a burnt offering." We see Jephthah making this deal with Yahweh, this deal with God. Lord, if you do this, I'll do that. This kind of quid pro quo approach to spirituality. The natives of the Canaanite land, the Ammonites even themselves, this is how they would interact with their gods, that they would seek to appease the gods and offer sacrifices in order to garner their praise and attention and favor. Remember, as we've been talking about the judges' work in the land of Canaan at this time, they are confronting these nations that have allowed moral corruption and child sacrifice to dominate and demonstrate the way that they believed life and spirituality and purpose was to be lived out. The nation of Israel was supposed to be set apart. They were supposed to be set apart and different. But here we see Jephthah no longer understanding who his God is, the character of their God. He's allowed the character of the foreign gods, these idols in the land, to come into his mind, as if he can manipulate God into his favor by offering a sacrifice. And the tragedy of this story is that when he returns home, it is not some animal that pops out, but it's a person. It says in verse 35, "And as soon as he saw her, he tore off his clothes and said, 'Alas, my daughter, you brought me low. You have become the cause of great trouble to me. I've opened my mouth to the Lord, and I can't take back my vow.'" Whoa. Now, the verbiage used makes it possible that he was expecting there to potentially be a human who walked out of the door. The language allows for that interpretation. So it's not that he was unwilling to go to those extremes to get God's favor as he battled the Ammonites. But he was shocked when it was his daughter. And we see this tragedy, this tragic tale. When we misunderstand the character of God, it is to our own detriment and pain. Do you believe in the character of God? The great truth that he is a holy God, the truth that he is a God of peace, that he's a God that is other than us, that he's a God that is distinct yet who draws near, that he's a God of righteousness and love and compassion and forgiveness and justice, not a God we manipulate to get what we want. These are the way the Canaanite gods operated. And Jephthah, even though God uses him to help the nation, we see the tragedy in his own life for not understanding the character of the God he was to know and follow and serve. It says then that the daughter went into the hills and mourned the fact that she would, her virginity. And then in verse 39, it says, at the end of 2 months of her mourning, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. Now, later on, then it talks about that others, daughters in Israel, would lament over the daughter of Jephthah. Some interpret that as potentially meaning that she was confined to a life of perpetual virginity and celibacy. But it is very reasonable in the text to think that Jephthah followed through with his act of killing his own daughter as a sacrifice, to not go back on his tragic vow. Understanding the character of God, it's pivotal for our walk with God. What do you know about the God of grace and truth and holiness? The beauty of it is that if we know Jesus Christ, God in the flesh has come to give us a demonstration of what this looks like. So look to Jesus if you want to know God. Look to Jesus as the example of love, grace, compassion, forgiveness, holiness, and righteousness and justice. And don't think we can manipulate God to our own favor. What way are you trying to do that in your life? Don't do it. Don't give in. Don't think that God is there as some cosmic gumball machine here to do our will and purposes. We're here to submit to his, to trust his character, to know that he works all to good, and to follow him faithfully. The tale of Jephthah, it's a warning for us to follow God and not manipulate, to trust God and to not use our own means for our own ends, and to believe in the character of God that is good and gracious and true. Believe in him today and trust him for whatever issues and challenges you're seeking his will for right now.